The date is Friday, June 18th, and you're listening to Entertain This, a thought-provoking podcast encapsulating all things entertainment. In this episode, we're throwing it all the way back to one of the oldest stories written, Homer's The Odyssey, and how it connects to the classic film O Brother, Where Art Thou? Both are timeless classics that are laid out on the premise of something called the hero's journey. So go ahead and listen in, be our hero, and enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of your favorite podcast on the internet, encapsulating all things entertainment. Entertain this.
Entertain this.
Ooh.
As always, I'm Alex.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Nick.
And I didn't forget a goddamn thing this week.
You forgot one part.
I forgot a part?
No, you didn't. Welcome to
All right,
Entertain This,
chill.
everyone. I'm Nick. Today we'll be talking about whatever Michael wants to talk about.
He never takes the wheel here.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Is this
It's a new
supposed to
Get
be
season.
back
cold
in your
open, or
lane,
like-
buddy. This is my cold open. This is like that weird Simpsons intro when they like had Rick and Morty like crash into the living room and like
We
all
love
the
the couch
Simpsons
gags.
probably died. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was weird. Do you have like a cold open, Nick? Do you have like a legit cold open?
Do I have to do like a monologue about current events or anything? Or
No, that'll work. We did it. That was the cold open.
All right,
just now.
cool.
I figured we let Alex talk for another 5 minutes about, whatever he wants to talk about. If you want to do that.
All right.
I mean, I
Uh,
don't run the show. Okay, I'm not a showrunner.
I know
That's
that
somebody else's job.
I know that Chloe is our showrunner as well as our fact checker, and for that
Mhm.
reason, to our audience, she probably seems like a really good egg. But she did have me sneak into a movie this week. So, Chloe, if you're listening, tisk tisk,
Breaking
uh,
the
you-
law. Breaking
you made
the
me
law.
you made me do a bad boy thing. Actually, it was my idea, and it was because the movie that we had bought tickets to was accidentally in a different movie theater, like across town. So we just walked in and we saw The Conjuring, and it was really great. Anyway, this is Michael's week, so that's enough about talking about my outlaw act. Let's talk about what Michael wants to talk about. Michael, I'm gonna throw this mic over to you after having snatched it from Nick's sweaty grasp because he had
My
taken
hands
it
are
away
sweaty.
from me.
Oh,
He had
so
taken away
wet.
my throne. So here he.
Oh, why is it
Whoa.
sticky?
I don't know. I
Nick,
don't
what'd
know.
you do?
I had a
Don't
PB&J.
touch
It's no
our
problem.
mics ever again.
It's a really good jelly sandwich, let me tell you.
All right.
All right. Well, first, let me just say it's good to be back. Took a week off last week, and it's always a great time when I get to talk to y'all, to you boys.
Yeah. We didn't even mention the fact that you were MIA last week, but
Mhm.
luckily our showrunner Chloe stepped up. She stepped in and she wrote it out with us. So we
Yeah.
are forever grateful for her for that.
Yeah. I actually watched last week's episode, and you all did a fantastic job.
Oh, come on! Don't lie to us.
He likes us.
Okay, I didn't watch it.
Yeah, see, that was the
You
lie.
liar. No, I did. It was good. It was good.
Don't even know what to.
All right, but moving on to today. First, I want to take a note from your all's books. I want to start off by asking you a question,
No.
Oh, what the hell?
not a rhetorical one.
Hold on. So in this episode, Nick has taken my cold open. Michael has taken the starting the episode with the question. What do I have? What do you mean?
You get to be
All just
Michael?
crumbling away.
I don't know.
All right. The Kentucky y'all is flowing. Oh yeah.
What the hell does that even mean?
But anyway, so I want to ask you two.
Yeah.
You all both know the famous book Homer's Odyssey, right?
I've actually read that
Okay.
book. Yes.
Oh wow, good.
Is that
Uh,
different from the Odyssey? Like the
No.
Odyssey? Homer
same
is the
thing.
guy who wrote it. So
Yeah,
it
he
is
wrote the Iliad and the
Homer's book,
Odyssey.
The Odyssey.
Not
Got it.
Homer Simpson, by the way. We should note that.
Mhm, mhm. But I want to ask you two, why is the Odyssey something that we even still talk about today? Like, why is it important?
Nick, you're educated.
Yes, I do have 2 college degrees. That is true. None of them are in literature. I'll note that right off the bat. But the reason why Homer's Odyssey is still talked about today is not only because it's a classical piece of literature from a long time ago that still survives today. That in and of itself is something to be notified of, I guess. But also it's I think it's written off an actual historic event, or it's inspired by one. But it's the basic. I don't want to say it's coming of age, but you'll get into the plot, I'm sure. But the gist is that this guy goes away for a long, long time, and he goes to fight a war or being on a ship for a long time in the Navy or something like that, without the village people this time. And he comes back, and he finds
that was a joke. That was a joke that you just tried to tell. It just went by so fast that it sounded like a fact, but it was actually a joke.
Yeah, it's not a fact. It had nothing to do with the village people. But anyways, he comes back, and his wife has moved on. He's the wife is like seeing another guy at this point. So, as to why it's still significant and talked about today, I really couldn't give you one solid answer, but I can give you a list of reasons as to why it might be.
Yeah. And so I think that's one of the really cool things about it is like it really has done a lot. So like some of the few things that I know of from just taking like AP English in high school is, like you said, it's one of the oldest forms of written text that we still have available today. It's something like nearly 3,000 years old.
May I take a quick stab at something? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that it is one of the first instances of the trope of the hero's journey.
Hero's journey, that's what it is.
Oh boy, are you correct?
I couldn't remember the thing. Wow.
Which is like, it's like a 16 or 7, it's like a whole bunch of steps, but all of these steps make up like what is known as the hero's journey, and they're all very specific.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly it. And it's because of that makes it one of the most influential stories ever told. We wouldn't have so many of our favorite movies, books, plays, even songs, or any form of really entertainment. Like, we owe a lot of them to this nearly 3,000-year-old poem. And one of the most entertaining, but not nearly as important works that I wanted to kind of cover alongside of this is a movie directly inspired by it, kind of. One of my favorite movies of all time, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? So first I want to ask, have you two ever seen it?
I want to say yes.
I've seen parts of it. It's one of those movies that have like shown up on TV, and I've watched like 20 minutes of the beginning and like 20 minutes of the end and like 10 minutes here and like 5 minutes there. But it's not one that like I've sat down and watched all the way through.
Yeah, it's a very like memey and quotable movie.
Then I've probably seen it. Yeah. Can you remind me? Is it the one with it's kind of set in the 1930s? And they sing little songs. It's set in
like Depression era Mississippi.
Okay. Is this that one that has the line where it's like that man down the street says that he'll give you 5 cents if you sing in his can?
Yep.
That's the one. That. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yep. It is extremely memeable. You're right.
Yep. It's got quote after quote after quote. It's got like, damn, we're in a tight spot. Happens multiple times over and over again. How's my hair? Because he's bona fide. And alongside of that, it has just an immaculate soundtrack to go along with the setting. The entire thing is like old South folk and like soul music,
which is just in there. Yeah.
Oh, it warms the heart up. Let's see. Yeah, so just a second ago, we started talking a little bit about the hero's journey, and it's something that we've talked about on the show before, but I just wanted to give like a quick little recap of what it is. Not going into like all the fine details or whatnot, but it's kind of like a sort of story template that involves some hero who goes on some kind of adventure, encounters some major crisis, whether that be like external or internal, and eventually comes home and is a completely changed person for good or bad. The Odyssey takes us on this path following the titular Odysseus, a man who is shown to be impatient and puts pride above all else. Let's see. The Odyssey takes us on this path following him. We follow his tale as he attempts to return home to Ithaca, where he will reassert himself as its king following the Trojan War, which is covered in the kind of prequel poem, the Iliad. Immediately after this, and after a skerfuffle with a Cyclops,
Say that word one more time.
Skerfuffle.
Love it.
Yep.
Kerfuffle and scuffle. You just.
Yep.
I like that. That's nice.
After the skerfuffle with a Cyclops,
we'll get there.
Odysseus and his crew are blown off course from their journey home by the sea god Poseidon, unable to return home for almost 10 years. During this time, Odysseus learns in his absence, many suitors have taken up residence in his home, attempting to win the affection of his wife, Penelope.
No!
We then follow Odysseus' journey as he grows into a more patient man, one who's able to put aside his pride, even reducing his stature to that of a beggar, all to be together with his wife once more.
We love that.
Now, in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, we follow a very similar character, Everett, a quick-talking, very self-absorbed con man who tricks his two fellow inmates that they are joined together by lock and chain because they were on a chain gang, convinces them to come with him on a journey to find a treasure that he buried in the dirt that is now sunken below a flooded lake. Now,
who is that played by?
Robert Downey Jr.
Really?
Yeah. And this is really the role that made me fall in love with Robert Downey Jr. as an actor.
Yeah.
It is just such a different performance compared to any other performance he's ever given. And it lights my heart up. It makes me feel good just to hear him talk. And then, so we've got Pete and Delmar, his companions, who are not quite so mentally equipped as Everett is. We follow them as they journey through Depression-era Mississippi as they try and escape from this chain gang. Unbeknownst to Pete and Delmar, Everett is trying to make his way back home to be reunited with his wife and his 6 children, his 6 baby girls. So we can already see like the similarities between the two. I believe even in the beginning of the movie, it even says inspired by the Odyssey.
Yeah, and it's not Robert Downey Jr., it's George Clooney you're thinking of, if we're talking about Where Art Thou?
Our fact checker she was.
Should I play the
so
music
happily,
before that? I'm sorry.
Nope. She was so happily casted in her dream show. So she is currently at rehearsals for that. Yeah. She is duly missed, obviously, but the role, I guess, will be played tonight by Nick Mustakangis.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah, I didn't think Robert Downey Jr. tracked that movie because, like, I was thinking of the guy, and then I was thinking about his face, and it wasn't Robert Downey. It was an Iron Man.
I think Robert Downey Jr. would have been just
a good replacement, yes. But George Clooney's got the part.
George Clooney. Sorry, yeah, that's what I meant. I just thinking of pretty guy with dark
hair.
Boy,
dark hair boy.
And then so we have his companions Pete and Delmar, who are played by John Turturro.
He's the goofy guy from Holes.
Yep. Yep. And then Delmar is played by Tim Blake Nelson.
An unknown third actor.
Well, so
just kidding.
He was also in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
He was.
Yeah, which he was Buster Scruggs.
That's the guy.
Yeah, and one of the things that ties the two together is they're both made by the same people, the Coen brothers.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah. So the Coen brothers, like,
guys, we're doing so bad this episode.
What are you talking about?
Chloe, we need you to come back as soon as possible. Tim Blake Nelson was the guy from Holes.
Oh,
the other guy
is
the guy who I don't know.
Yeah.
We're doing so bad.
Awesome.
We need our fact checker back. Anyway.
No, we're fine.
No, we're doing great. Let's keep this ball rolling.
Sweet. I haven't seen Holes in a long time, so I was just kind of like, yeah, totally. Yeah, he sure is in
Holes.
Yeah.
Right.
Stanley Yonats.
But yeah, so the Coen brothers, they wrote, produced, directed, yada yada yada, that whole kit and caboodle.
Yep.
Which like the Coen brothers have written and made some of my favorite movies. The Big Lebowski.
Yep.
Incredible movie.
Such a good movie.
No Country for Old Men.
Another one. Yep.
Fargo. Yeah. And The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is super popular within the stock market meme community right now because it's that clip of James Franco where he's being hung and he looks at the guy and he's like, first time, huh? And one of the memes is like me watching Tesla fall like over 300% in the market today. Newbies who just like Elon Musk and just threw $100 in. And it's like, first time, huh?
First time? That's where it is.
Oh my God. So we're following this group of people as Pete and Delmar attempt to follow Everett after Everett tricks them into following him for his own selfish desires.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially where we've come now. Through this journey, they encounter a blind prophet who gives them a lift along the railway. It tells them stories of that they will find a treasure, but not the one they are seeking.
There's friendship all along.
Kind of.
Was it though?
They encounter a Cyclops, which ends up being played by, and I'm actually looking it up this time to make sure I get it, John Goodman as the character Big Dan Teague, a Bible salesman who also shares a lot of similarities to Everett. They're both quick talking con men. And they also encounter a black guitarist they pick up alongside the road. And who apparently the night before sold his soul to the devil in order to play the guitar better than anyone else.
Oh, wow.
Love that.
Yep. And so it's through this that we end up seeing a lot of these similarities with the Odyssey. Another example that we have is around the halfway point of the movie. The crew encounter along their travels from the road the sound of women singing in the distance.
Oh, sirens.
Yep. Singing the song "Go to Sleep, Little Baby." You, me, and the devil make three. They bring them along, following Pete as he jumps out of the car, and they essentially get them drunk, make them go to sleep, and then they drag Pete off to somewhere that we don't know. It's really only revealed to us that the idea that he was possibly turned into a frog, that Everett and Delmar keep with them in order to try and keep safe.
Alrighty then.
Yeah. And it's throughout this entire journey that we get a lot of ideas about these people. From the get-go, we're presented with the whole idea that these people are from a chain gang. They've obviously committed some crimes. In general, we can kind of see them as like, they're generally not good people. Now, Pete and Delmar, definitely more of the kind of like naive, dumb type. Wherever you can tell he has earned his spot where he's at. At no point are we ever given like any idea what they did to get there. Purposefully left up to being ambiguous. But in general,
it's like the beginning of Skyrim where it's just like, oh, good, you're a win.
That's a good meme.
Exactly.
I like that.
But yeah, so we're just presented with the idea that these are just not good people in the same way that Odysseus is not presented as a good person. And even tracking throughout the history around when it was written in Greece, Odysseus was seen as a hero. He was seen as someone who was coming home to claim his land, someone who was a war hero in the Trojan War. Whereas the writing, as people read it when it was the Roman Empire, Odysseus was seen as an anti-hero. They didn't value that pride, that war-like mentality anymore. Or no, they still did value it, but like because he diverges from that and becomes a changed man, they see that as not necessarily the best thing. The whole
so the opposite.
might is
so,
right. Yeah.
Gotcha. So they see him as an anti-hero because he goes from being what they consider to already be perfect through this character change that makes him unperfect to them.
Yep, exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because back then you got to remember, like when people sign up for the Roman army, that was a life gig.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you either died on the battlefield or you just stayed a general throughout your entire life. So good thing to note there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so we've got this parallel between Odysseus and Everett. Now, throughout this entire thing, we watch as Delmar and Pete, they come to terms very quickly with it. They are like needing redemption. They need to be saved. They aren't smart enough to be able to.
Sorry, that just triggered something in my head. There's that like really famous Bible story about the two thieves who are put on the cross with Jesus. Like there was Jesus on one side and then the two thieves. And I don't know.
Names, I don't think. Yeah.
Every time that I hear like three people and then two of them want redemption, I immediately think of this story.
Yeah, I can see.
I don't know. If I find more parallels, I'll let you know.
We always like to bring up the Bible somehow. I don't know how that happens, but it just does.
Well, okay? I mean, it makes sense for in this instance because like we're talking about like a story that happens in Depression era Bible Belt.
Yeah,
and it's constantly referenced.
When it comes to things in entertainment that are often like used as reference points when writing, the Bible is one of them. Like the story of Christ, the story of a martyr. Like you'll see a lot of Christ. It's called the Christ figure. It's like a thing in storytelling where there is a Christ figure and it's supposed to represent either like religion or sacrifice or something along that nature. But when it comes to entertainment, like the Bible is huge. It's almost unavoidable. Just like it's almost unavoidable to talk about the hero's journey when you're talking about stuff like this.
Yeah.
They're just
really the only book that has been more influential than the Odyssey has been the Bible.
So if we're in the business of talking about entertainment, like
possible future episode? Question mark?
No, we will not be doing an episode on the Bible.
Bring out my
not
King
that
James
kind of
edition,
podcast.
start thumping it. Ladies and gentlemen,
there are for sure podcasts out there that are about that, and we suggest that if you're looking for that, you go find it there. And thanks and good night.
Just stop.
Anyways, so we've got Pete and Delmar. They are two people looking to be saved, whether that's by the hand of Everett or some other means. About halfway through the movie, we come to a scene where Everett, Delmar, and Pete are all standing alongside the river. As they are, a clergy of church members comes down the shoreline to be baptized. Upon seeing an opportunity presenting itself, Pete and Delmar both jump at the immediate opportunity to be quote unquote saved. The entire time Everett is kind of chiding them and ridiculing them for believing in such nonsense, for looking for some means other than themselves to make the world essentially make sense. They immediately upon being baptized, exclaiming to everyone there and around that they are saved, that they are no longer bad people. And this comes up multiple times throughout the story. With when they meet the black guitarist, which let me get his name real quick so I stop referring to him as that.
Yes,
Jimi Hendrix,
Tommy Johnson.
Okay,
Tommy Johnson, which is actually referenced which is actually like a reference to a blues musician of the same name who also claimed that he had sold his soul to the devil for his guitar skills.
Okay.
They pick up Tommy Johnson, and Everett makes the claim that he's the only one at this point who's unaffiliated, given that his two companions have sided with God and Tommy Johnson has sided with the devil.
He's the middle ground.
Yep.
That's funny.
Well, that's the thing about him, though, is that he has sided with like a greater force, but instead of looking for it, because he says it to him, like instead of looking for it in God or looking for it in the devil, like he is his own God. He has signed his soul away to him. Like,
and he really does see himself like that.
And that's his like that's his major flaw. I mean, that's what makes him the anti-hero.
Yeah, and that's what starts his entire journey off in the first place. Is he believes in himself so much that he convinces two dumber people that are looking to be saved that he is their savior.
A lot of cults have started under stupider means.
That's fair.
Not wrong.
But throughout this journey, we are also presented with other forces that are also evil. This is where it kind of comes into play, this idea of moral relativism. Are you two familiar with the term?
No.
That's kind of like, well, it is what it is, right? It's looking at.
If I had to break it down by words, it's probably like
it is. What
it's probably your morality is based off of like your situation and your perspective of what's going on.
Yeah, it's all about like whether something is moral or not when being compared to something else. So it's one of those things where it's like you look at like a high school bully or something like that, not a good person. You compare that person to, I don't know, say Hitler.
God damn it.
They look like a good person.
He said the H word.
They look like a much better person.
Oh yeah, they look like Jesus.
We need a better bad person who isn't like a mass murderer. If you guys have any suggestions, please let us know. We need like a pop culture someone to.
It's just so easy. Everyone knows that is like, oh yeah, bad guy immediately.
Let's just say like
Emperor Palpatine.
Great.
Well, he's not really
great. It wasn't even hard.
Listen, the Empire didn't do anything wrong. Okay,
you shut your whore mouth.
It's true.
Yeah, I think that's a good jumping off point. Is that I would sell my soul for Michael's voice specifically. If I could get those deep basses, if my podcast voice could sound as good as Michael's, then maybe we'd get more than 2 viewers.
Then just have me in the middle with my like, I don't know, what would you call it, baritone, if that.
So kind of along that lines, one of the big things that's kind of played out throughout the movie is like, what would you do for what you want?
What do you do for a Klondike bar? Yeah,
I know. And like for Tommy Johnson, like his whole shtick is like, like they even ask him like, so you sold your everlasting soul, you gave that up just to play guitar well? And he's like, yeah, I wasn't doing anything else with it.
Like, why do I need it?
Yeah, so it's one of those things like, what are you willing to give up to get what you want? For Everett, it is essentially a condemnation on his life because by escaping the chain gang and attempting to be back with his family, he's essentially sentencing himself to prison if he ever gets caught. And with that, he's so willing to take these two poor sodden souls along with him. And it's even highlighted upon the fact is that Pete, when they escaped from the chain gang, was only had 2 more weeks of his sentence, but was willing to give that up based on the promises of this treasure.
Yeah, I mean, think of the comparison between like giving your soul up to Satan and giving your like self-sustainability or your individualism up to like these other 2 men. Like he wanted to escape prison so bad that he decided like, I'm going to give up the one thing that I love, which is myself and being self-reliant to escape this prison. It's almost the exact same deal.
Yep.
It's ironic, actually.
Absolutely.
Textbook irony. Love it.
Yeah. And so let's see. Where do I want to go from here? So yeah, so we get presented with this idea of moral relativism with Everett not being a good person. We now, as we're moving along, we start to see Pete and Delmar, like where they started as both also not being good people. We now feel a lot more sympathy for them, and the movie starts to do this strategically immediately after they're baptized. Whereas like you see them as being like dumb guys that you kind of feel sorry for, they really start to lay it on heavy that Everett is really just taking advantage of them immediately after this. And throughout the journey, we start to see this more and more and more. Eventually, Everett does make his way back to his hometown and encounters his wife and his 6 children again, his 6 daughters. And when presented with the idea that his now divorced wife, who lies to his daughters, tells his daughters that he was instead hit by a train, that there's nothing left, that he went kablooey, all because plenty of decent men have been hit by trains.
It's true. I know that firsthand.
Instead of having to explain to them that their father was not a good person. When Everett is faced with this fact, as well as with that his ex-wife now has a new suitor, his self-driven nature drives him to attempt to fight this new suitor in the middle of a convenience store in front of his wife and children. He promptly gets his butt kicked and is humiliated, leaving the scene with his wife saying, "That is not my husband. That is just a drifter."
Ooh, ain't that a kick in the head?
Yep. And it is at this point that Everett reaches kind of his lowest point. He now has no really way forward. And through this, he starts to learn about what it means to need to depend on other people. And through that, caring about other people. At another point, they come across a Ku Klux Klan gathering where their friend, Tommy Johnson, is going to be hung. The boys all dress in KKK attire, sneak in and attempt to save their friend. They do so. And in the process, we find out that all of these other characters that we've seen throughout this movie are members of the KKK. Another side plot that's happening throughout this entire thing is that there is this gubernatorial race between the incumbent candidate, who is someone who's just kind of like trying to find new ways to present himself. We are first introduced to him as he is attempting to do a radio spot on this newfangled medium. And we kind of see him just kind of like trying to ride along, not really knowing what to do. On the other hand, we're presented with this other candidate who is the one who seems like they know exactly what they're doing. He's rallying all of the local people. He is getting his Everett's daughters to come and sing gospel songs for the local group, presenting this whole image and idea that he is this godly man who can come and save the town, presenting himself as the town's savior, much like how Everett was doing himself. We find out at this KKK gathering that this new mayor, this one who is presenting himself as a savior, alongside of John Goodman's character, the Bible salesman, are all members of the KKK.
Wolf.
Yep.
It's like, how do you balance that out?
Yeah, and it's through this process that we really start to see the whole idea of moral relativism. We see this small gaining character by Everett is amplified a million times over because it's immediately compared to this overarching evil that is the KKK.
Yeah, so it's like, you thought Everett was a bad guy before, but then he got the shit kicked out of him and his family disowned him. So now he's like poor little puppy. And also him in comparison to the KKK, you're like, oh, okay, he's not. Okay, well, he's bad. Like he's selfish. He's an asshole, but he's not the KKK. So.
Right. And it's alongside his efforts to also save their friend Tommy Johnson, where this empathy that you have for Everett is kind of kicked into top notch.
I have a relative reference, if we can go on a bit of a branch off real quick. Recently, Marvel released a new series on Disney Plus called Loki, all about the trickster god. Loki is a great example of relative morality because if you're talking about the first Avengers movie, Loki is the worst guy. Like the big bad as it gets, like bringing aliens to Earth, like destroying New York City. He's as bad as it gets. But later on down the line, when we meet like Thanos and like Thanos is the big bad evil guy, you're like, oh, Loki's kind of cute. He's just a little trickster. He's just a little trickster guy. Just a little,
especially with the little bits of interaction you get with him in like Ragnarok.
Yeah. as you like learn more, and then he is immediately compared to this like greater evil. And in the series Loki that they just released, they have to like cover that in one episode. So they use like almost this exact argument where they're like, yeah, you were big and bad, but then Thanos comes and you're not big and bad anymore. So I don't know what you're trying to like lead up to.
Yeah, and moral relativism is a concept that you're going to see used in pretty much any piece of entertainment where they are wanting the bad guy to work with either the good guy or become the good guy. It's a very easy way to trick like the human mind into thinking, oh, like he's not actually that bad.
Yeah, that's something that I see a lot, like in entertainment that I watch, is that there's the bad guy, and you know they're supposed to be the bad guy, but they start talking in a way that makes a lot of sense to you, and you're like, by the end of the movie, you're like, am I the bad guy? Because what they were saying made a lot of sense. I don't know.
I feel like that's something different.
It is.
Nick. What we're talking about is like, so like, take for instance in the second Deadpool, when introduced to Cable, and when Cable first shows up, he's like trying to kill Deadpool and like doing all this evil shit. You're like, oh, Cable's a bad dude. But then by the end of the movie, he actually has to partner up with Deadpool to defeat this like chaos kid who like is going to grow up and like be like this huge like apocalyptic dude. And to make that switch, there has to be a moment where like, first off, he sits down and talks with our protagonist, who in this case is Deadpool, and they reach some sort of an understanding, and then immediately we are introduced to our hero and the previous villain now interacting with the true villain and realizing, in comparison to this true villain, what we thought was the main villain in Cable actually wasn't that bad of a guy, and he had the reasons to do it. And for that reason, his morality in our eyes is relative to the situation that he was put in. Relative morality.
And a lot of the times too, it's used as a way to justify like the good guy doing what would be considered like a bad act. Like Cable, as another example, comes back to kill a child.
Yeah, but he's doing it because he's doing it because the child that he's killing grows up to like cause the giant apocalypse that ends up killing his wife and daughter.
Yep.
Like
exactly.
It's the equivalent of like, are you morally, hey, guess what we're about to talk about? Are you morally wrong?
Hitler. No.
Are you morally wrong for going back in time to kill baby Hitler? Because at the time he was just a baby. If you showed up in a time machine and you shot this baby in his crib, like the news isn't going to be about Hitler. They're going to talk about that one guy who showed up in a magic box and shot a baby. Like that's your relative morality at that point is very poor.
Yep.
Because no one knows he's going to grow up to be Hitler.
He could have been an art student. Who knows?
We should have a Hitler count in our podcast.
Oh, no. Nick, make a graphic.
Make a graphic.
What are we talking about?
Oh, brother, where art thou? Yeah, let's get back to that.
Oh, brother.
So they save their friend, and something we actually didn't talk about was like kind of what you mentioned earlier, Alex, was how you knew the movie. They go to a recording studio upon the first time meeting Tommy Johnson, and they go and they convince the blind person who runs the music studio to let them perform a song for them to earn some money to make their way back to Everett's hometown.
We should note that at this point in the movie, he's only looking for African-American artists. He says that they sell better. So they lie to the blind man and they say, no, we're African-American fellas. Like, but it's three white dudes standing there. So and I don't know if that's important to the plot, but it is funny. So I want to talk about it.
There's actually like a whole big symbology thing around eyesight in this movie. Because for a movie, like there are multiple characters that have some sort of like vision impairment of some sort. So we've got the studio owner who is completely blind. We have the sheriff who is chasing them throughout Mississippi from when they escape the chain gang. He's not blind per se, but he wears hooded sunglasses. So sunglasses with like blinders on the sides that essentially seal against his face. They are dark tinted and mirrored. We have the Bible salesman, John Goodman's character. He is blind in one eye and wears a eye patch. Even the dog that accompanies the sheriff is blind. but is used as the tracking dog because it's got a great nose.
Mhm.
As well as the prophet that they encountered in the beginning. He is blind. Eyesight tends to mean a few different things. It means some sort of either insight into the world or lack of insight. We have the prophet who is completely blind but is able to see the world for what it really is and attempts to relay that to this group of characters. We've got on the opposite end the studio owner who is completely blind, and because of that, it represents his ability to be fooled, or like his inability to see the world correctly. He just takes Everett at his word. And along with that, we have the let's talk about John Goodman's character, the Bible salesman, blind in one eye. He is only able to see the world for the bad of what it is, whether or not he chooses to see it that way, or that's just how he experiences it.
I also like the symbolism of the other guy who you had talked about with the like deep set frames. It's like he chooses to be blind about things because he chooses to blind himself by putting these on.
Exactly. Yep. And he represents kind of blind justice throughout this. He represents kind of the lack of moral relativism.
Because there's a choice to take those glasses off and see the world, but instead he chooses to stay blind and just judge what's right in front of him.
Exactly. Yeah. He chooses to ignore the relativism in the world that is around him, only judging for what he can directly see. And so it's even after this whole hero's journey where we see Everett turn into a changed man, someone who is by the end of things able to feel for his companions, someone who goes out of his way to do good. It doesn't matter to the sheriff. The sheriff still at the end of the movie, after everything that they go through, after Everett is able to be reunited with his wife and daughters, his wife agreeing to marry Everett if he's able to find their original wedding ring, which was the original treasure that Everett talked about to the other, to Pete and
Did
Delmar.
he like throw it in the lake?
It was at their cabin, which was right by the lake, essentially.
I see.
And so it is upon this where Everett and the boys go to this cabin to try and find the ring, where the sheriff finds them and attempts to hang them right there. And keep in mind, this is after the whole KKK fiasco. Before this, they actually are able to root out this in the non-incumbent gubernatorial candidate. He essentially exposes himself to everyone in the town for the racist that he truly is.
See, it shouldn't be better that he exposes himself as a racist. But my brain was like, oh, he exposes himself. Disgusting. And then you said as a racist. And I was like, oh, okay. But it's not, is it?
Yeah,
it's not okay.
So I kind of skipped over a few things, so I'll cover that real quick.
Okay.
So when they went back to that recording studio to film or to record that song, they recorded "I'm a Man of Constant Sorrow," which is
a good tune. Yeah,
it's a banger.
Banger.
And,
I was just listening to our Disney episode the other day where we like say banger like 25 times.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Banger.
It was just crazy hearing you say that after listening to that episode.
But they record it and it goes incredibly well. They get the pittance of money that they are given for just recording the song and it turning out really well. Unbeknownst to them throughout this entire movie, the song becomes a hit and everybody knows it and loves it.
And thinks that it was recorded by 3 African-American gentlemen.
Four, yeah.
4.
They go by the name the Soggy Bottom Boys.
Yes.
And once they're back in town,
that should have been what we called the podcast.
I know.
The Soggy Bottom Podcast. Oh my god!
But it's after foiling this these acts by the KKK that they make their way back to town, and for an event that is being put on for the gubernatorial race, they go up and they sing their song as a way to distract the crowd. But it ends up turning out everybody already knows the song. Everybody then in turn loves all of them. The mayor, who is part of the KKK, then yells out that he recognizes them. He's the one who spoiled their fun at the KKK and orders for them to be arrested for the damages that they caused. It's through that the whole town finds out he's a racist, and they drive him out of town, leaving the incumbent candidate as the sole member, as the sole person running for office.
But nobody says anything about the fact that these three singers were also at the KKK thing. Like, they're like, oh, I know these guys. They were at the KKK thing. And everybody was like, that means you were at the KKK thing, snitch. And then they run them out of town. And then they never talk about the fact that the other three guys were still definitely there.
Well, yeah, because the whole thing is like, oh, you stopped the KKK thing. Good for you guys.
Relative morality.
Yep. And it's through this, because they drive out the other candidate, the incumbent gives all four of the boys a full pardon for any of their crimes that they have committed.
Wow.
And so it's after this, they go to the cabin to find the ring, and the sheriff finds them and still attempts to hang them.
Even though like they've been pardoned.
Yep, because in his blind eyes, of justice, it doesn't matter if they're pardoned or not. They still committed crimes and deserve death.
Yeah.
It is through this that Everett, for the first time, falls to his knees and prays. He prays to God, asking for some sort of safety, some sort
intervention.
of intervention. And this is the first time that we see
Deus Ex Machina.
He's looking for that, yeah. And it's through this that this is the first time that we see Everett really try and look for something other than himself to save him. Immediately after this, the lake that they're by floods for inexplicable reason. Not just like a small flood, it is a rushing tide of water that wipes everything away.
Oh, you know why that is? I can explain it. I got this.
Sure.
My hand is raised. Okay, so you know the Great Depression, right? You had FDR. And
Are you going to talk about the Dust Bowl?
No, this is something called the Tennessee Valley Authority,
Ooh.
wherein they built dams and they flooded a lot of places that are in valleys to make cheap hydroelectric power for, the country. So it was a public works project, and there's a lot of towns that are at the bottom of lakes, especially around here and down in Tennessee, especially, that are just completely underwater and lost to the maps of history. So that's probably why the Great Depression.
There's like there's a whole ass city under like Red River Gorge, isn't there?
Yep.
Or something like that.
Yep. Because they dammed off these gorges, and then what was behind the dam obviously has to hold water somehow. So it's probably a town under there.
Yeah.
Who cares?
No,
man?
that makes sense, because like he says at the beginning the treasure is below the lake, is buried under the lake. They probably dammed up the lake more upriver, leaving the rest of this land now exposed. And that would make sense, because that would mean his cabin was at the bottom of this lake. Now they're able to get to it. Dam breaks, it's flooded. That makes sense.
Oh,
we got there.
All right, we used the
guys.
noodle.
Look at us! Wow,
We solved the mystery.
we're like a whole ass podcast now.
Yeah. But to kind of throw things back to earlier in the movie, we saw that once Pete and Delmar saw their opportunity to be saved through means of baptism, they were so. And it's from that point on, like we said before, we see them in a new light. We see them as more, because of moral relativism, we see them as being better people. We see them as actually being good people. Now it is after this point where Everett gets his own form of baptism through the water rushing through and over him.
I love that.
Wow. That's some nice
I love
symbolism.
that.
It's really good. And this entire time that this is happening, there is like a cappella, like soul music by these deep, like raspy voices going on in the background. And oh boy, do you just feel it in your soul. But it's after this, everything is wiped away. Everett is able to find the ring that he was looking for. And he's able to bring it back to his wife. And it's through this interaction with him and his wife that we see him as for the grown person that he truly is. He has gone through the entirety of the hero's journey. including even divine action.
Yeah.
And redemption is really the biggest, like, as much as we want to talk about like the moral relativism as like a tool, the real meat of the story here is redemption in both the Odyssey and O Brother, Where Art Thou? Even at the end of it, in both the Odyssey and O Brother, the main characters, we still don't see them as necessarily good people, but we see them as changed. We see them as improving upon themselves, making some sort of change due to the circumstances that they have been presented with. And that's something that I have personally been trying to deal with, especially in like this last really like week or so, to kind of fill everyone in on like what happened and why I was absent last week. Monday on Memorial Day, my small dog Nala, we took her and my other dog Mochi to a dog park. There, Nala was attacked by a Great Dane. I was standing right there over her when it happened. And in that process, I ended up injuring my hand trying to save her. Immediately after this, fortunately, I was able to wrestle Nala from its mouth, but unfortunately, the next morning, she passed away. And one of the things I've really struggled with this last week, especially like the night she died, I laid in bed sobbing because I couldn't save her. I stood over her as her protector, and I wasn't able to save her. The thing that I've really experienced this last week is that life is made up of small heroes' journeys. We experience small individual events, and we choose how to change because of them. Typically, like how I would react to something like this in the past is that I would grow cold. I'd close myself off from the world, and I would try and deal with this all by myself. But through what, in my mind, I'm not a religious person, but I'm still going to call it divine action, or divine circumstance. I've had incredible people around me to help me get through this, along with my girlfriend. We've both had fantastic people right by our sides to help us through this entire thing. And it's through this small little hero's journey that we've experienced that we both have come out changed people. We both now, it's so much easier for us to recognize the wonderful people around us, to not want to close ourselves off, to open ourselves up, to be emotionally vulnerable, to open ourselves up for other people to step in and allow us to heal. And that's something that I think this book and this movie both highlight so incredibly well, even if it is in a very lighthearted way. And it's something that I really felt connected to and wanted to talk about. And I thank you guys so much for listening. Yeah, there's one of them. there's Mochi.
Mochi.
She one of the best parts about everything through this is that Mochi she's an empath to the to the core of her soul. Whenever Jade or I are sad or feeling emotional in any way, she's right by our side to cheer us up, just like how all of you guys are, and like our friends and family.
Damn, dog, you had me over here crying.
I'm trying to hold it back.
There's now video evidence of me crying, which is just so great.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to hold him back. I'm letting my eyes get real red and watery, but I'm keeping it back so far.
She can tell.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's really why I wanted to talk about all this stuff. It's just felt so important for me to kind of relay the life experience I've had this last week and a half, and just try and use it to present some sort of positive message, to relay the positive emotions and thoughts that I have been able to kind of feel throughout this really traumatic and negative experience and turn it into something good.
I think that speaks volumes as to like what our core mission is on this podcast, which is like taking these things in entertainment and like putting them in a different light. But at the end of the day, like everything that we talk about on this podcast comes from this like deep place within us. And entertainment is just beautiful in that way, that you can find like salvation in a movie that's at its front just like a funny movie about three goofballs, but at the end of the day it means so much. And Michael, you mean so much to us.
And I can't put into words how much like you guys and family and friend, like everyone has been for us.
Yeah,
it's been very eye-opening.
I think just like you said, it's all about the hero's journey that you go on, and one of those steps is like rock bottom in the hero's journey. But that's the thing, is it never ends there. That's always like the midpoint, and you always reach that prospect again. The final step in the hero's journey is actually returning home. With new knowledge learned, and we can see that in Brother Where Art Thou, but also in your experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Rock bottom doesn't last forever. I mean, you always bounce back from it, and how high you bounce is like half the battle. So I think just showing up this week is like, that says something about you, you know, like here's this horrible event, and then here you are the next week, you're right back at it. So I mean, that's fortitude, if anything else.
It's kind of like what I said before. It's the returning home with new knowledge or a new aspect of yourself. That's all about, from what I've experienced, is how you choose to react to everything you just went through.
Yeah, man.
And I'm resolved from how I used to be to keep myself open, especially to you all.
That's really awesome. I love that.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and cut to promos so that we can have time to cry. And then when we come back, I believe Nick will be doing a quick this. So we'll be right back.
Good luck.
Justin Wallace, Mitch Glasgow, and Deanna Cosby, 3 daily commuters, are joining forces to create the comedy podcast known as Carpool Shenanigans. Each week we'll take a topic, tell a story, and hopefully make your drive to work just a little less shitty. Now the episode's about to begin, so we ask that you sit back, relax, and of course, let's get weird.
Hey, Cammy.
Hey, Bryant.
What do Robin Hood, Vlad the Impaler, and Mothman have in common?
IDK, what?
Well, they're all topics on our podcast Mystery, where each week we discuss a new myth and the history behind it. That's Myth Story with an IE. See you then.
Oh.
Hey, we're back.
Hello.
We're good because we get to listen to Myth Story, and that makes it so much better, actually. Now.
It's the carpool shenanigans that gets you pumped up, if I'm honest.
Oh, yeah. Right. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, what does me and you have in common?
We both like to howl.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We both just cried, but now Nick's gonna take over with his quick this.
Thanks, guys.
Your absolute least favorite thing, following up on emotional conversation.
Oh, no!
What do you do? What do you do?
I reset the timer, and I tell you that your time is about to start.
Okay. Can I get like
a
ready? Super Mario Brothers, like beep, beep, beep? Yeah. I can hear it in my head. Just start the damn timer.
Start.
Oh, okay.
This is going against your time, sir.
I know. As many of you know, I'm a fairly boring person, and it's rare for me to cut loose, show emotion, go crazy in many regards. But that's
go crazy,
go
crazy, go stupid.
That's reflected in the shows I watch too. There's This Old House, there's documentaries, to name a few of my personal favorites, but there is one show that I enjoy immensely, and it's not
God,
one you'd expect me to enjoy.
You complete
called-
this trio so well.
Oh, it's wonderful.
I'm
It's
sorry.
called
Go ahead.
The Eric Andre Show. Yeah, you
No
heard of that?
way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What? Are you kidding me? You
No.
let up by saying I watch boring shows. I'm a boring man. One of my favorite shows, the fucking Eric Andre Show. Are
I
you
love
nuts?
the Eric Andre Show.
I've watched every episode. Let's
I
go.
have. It's the topic of my quick list today. That's why I'm here talking about it. But
Me too. Let's go.
so let's get one thing out of the way. These late night talk shows you've heard of have gotten formulaic to the point of that they're just boring to watch, in my opinion. And there's a reason for that, but I probably don't watch these shows enough to even know. And so I'm past my bedtime, so I don't have time to research it. But basically, you got a dude behind a desk, and he interviews people that sit in the chair next to his desk. We've seen this approach used ever since the very dawn of television. And the Eric Andre Show takes this stereotypical late night host shtick and completely destroys it. Like, seriously, he begins every show by destroying his set, and it's kind of an ongoing gag. And if you're thinking at this point, seriously, Nick, that's what you're going to find funny about this show and is the senseless destruction of physical property, hold on to your horses, because that's just how the typical show starts. In contrast between what you might expect and what actually happens is the really comedic cornerstone of the show. It's the fact why scientists maybe think that's why we laugh in the first place, but who knows? You have this presumption of a late night talk show, and what happens within completely surprises you. Now, this is not to say that this is breaking any molds or anything or going into unfamiliar territory, because it still has those beloved celebrity interviews. And frankly, this comedy genre is pretty much par for the course for anything on Adult Swim.
Mm-hmm.
As detailed kind of in my dark humor episode, I often find joy in the sheer shock value of things. For instance, there's an ongoing bit in season 4 where Eric will be interviewing a celebrity and pull out a picture of a naked African-American man with Barack Obama's face photoshopped on display with his penis out and show it to the guest.
Yep.
So
Can we say that word? I think so.
I'll bleep it out. The guest then proceeds to react as any normal human being would. And to me, that's kind of like textbook surrealism. It's meant to be absurd. You wouldn't expect a Jimmy Kimmel or someone to come out one day completely naked and then sit behind the desk. Whereas Eric Andre just doing that gets hilarious reactions from the people he's interviewing. So I suppose you could call it trolling, but to me, it's kind of funny, okay? And beyond the interview segments, there are sketch comedy bits thrown into the mix as well. You get man on the street type of interviews with weird people in this show, and you
Bird
get
up!
you get to understand the true meaning of bird up. And you'll come away with a new appreciation of maybe Sprite or ranch dressing, but there's so many other bits that you really don't think you needed in your life, but you'll be happy to know that you've watched the show and you've experienced them. And if I haven't already convinced you to check out the show, people have compared this to an Andy Kaufman act. It's a little callback for you guys there.
If you guys haven't listened to our Andy Kaufman episode where we compare him to the performance of Jim Carrey playing him, then you should go check that out. Thank you and good night.
That's good, Eric. That was a good NPR impression thing. But anyways, Eric Andre embraces the postmodern irony that envelops all of us in this internet age and shows the absurdity of American politics too through this satire and mimicry. And it may be a little nihilistic, but oftentimes, as I've said before, comedians often paint the line between tragedy and comedy very thin. This is one of those times when the line is as thin as you can probably get it. So go check out the Eric Andre Show. It's on Hulu and Adult Swim now. So go check it out, huh?
Eric Andre is one of those it's one of those topics in entertainment that I wanted to do an entire episode on, and I'm glad that you did a quick this, but I still want to do an entire episode on it.
Please do.
Because there's so much weird shit that I know. Like, they hired celebrity lookalikes for the first season so that they could use those clips to convince other celebrities that real celebrities were on his show. That way they would agree to come onto his show. He did some nuts stuff. Or like the fact that they constantly, well, at the beginning it was an accident, but they constantly keep the studio at like 98 degrees inside so that it's so hot that like the guests just walk in and feel uncomfortable.
You can see it on their faces. They're all like covered in sweat. They're like
one of the people who came on who knew about Eric Andre was what's the guy's name?
Heck, what?
It's not Chance the Rapper. It's the other guy who's also a rapper and young, and he
Tyler,
wears
the
a
Creator.
hat. Tyler the Creator came on.
Oh yeah.
How
And
did I know that? Come on, guys.
if you know Tyler the Creator, like Tyler the Creator is the yes and guy of Hollywood. Like
He's
he
pretty crazy.
believes he's the weirdest, so he won't let anyone out weird him.
Yep.
Even in interviews with like Nardwuar, he wouldn't let Nardwuar out weird him to the point where they stood like statues for like an hour. When he came on the show, he was like straight laced, never drank, never did drugs, and Eric tried to convince him to do LSD because he said it would be awesome for the show. Like he spent like a good 3 hours trying to talk this kid into like drinking more and like getting more drunk and like smoking weed. Like, dude, come on, just do LSD with me. Like, let's do shrooms and do this show. It'll be awesome. Like, Eric is fucking chaos incarnate, and I
love it. I love a little chaos in my life.
That's right.
It is the
That's
spice.
Right.
Sprinkle on the bland rice that lies below.
It is the spice of life, yes. Guys, I think that's it for us this week. It's been a really great episode. We did it again. We came back another week. We talked to y'all for another hour. Well, there's the Kentucky y'all. There it is. Found it. We talked to you guys for an hour. That's like our whole job. So we did it. Now we get paid. And on that note, I think we're going to head out of here. We don't get paid. Not yet, but maybe someday. With all that being said, if you have something that you want to see us cover on the show, maybe something that means equally as much to you as this meant to Michael or Eric Andre meant to Nick, then hit us up. There's a couple of easy ways that you can do that. You can hit us up. You can email us. We are entertainthispodcast@gmail.com. You can send us suggestions there, and even easier ways to go to our website. It's www.entertainthis.net. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the homepage, there's a questionnaire you can fill out. You can send us your suggestions that way. Makes it a lot easier. But there are a number of other ways that you can connect with us, and that includes you can follow us on Twitter. We are entertain_this. On Instagram, we are entertain this podcast. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube if you want to see all of our video episodes, all of our visual gags that we so often do as we forget that we are an audio medium. Just look up Entertain This with the 3 dots. You'll find our logo. Our branding's so recognizable with us at this point. Like, you'll know us when you see us. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we just hope you guys have a great week. We thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you again next Friday. See ya!
Bye!
Bork!
This episode of Entertain This was written by Michael Savoya, with additional commentary from Alex Steele and Nick Mustakangas. Our showrunner and resident fact-checker is Chloe Price. Our theme music is Brush Bubble by Aaron Spencer, with additional interstitial music by DJW. Tune in every Friday for new episodes, and thanks for listening.